Joining me now here on the Knicks Film School pregame show. He's back! Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, back yet again for another round of Knicks Heat to preview this matchup from the Miami Heat beat. My good friend, your worst enemy, Mr. Giancarlo Navas. G, how you doing, buddy?
My man, I am back. What it do, baby?
We haven't talked since the playoffs last year. I had some personal stuff come up that we couldn't
Not on
do
air.
Not on air. No, we haven't. We've had talked a ton off the air. However,
Andrew's my new buddy, Knicks fans. You don't understand. This is a real friendship.
I hate to say it, Knicks fans, but I don't want to say you lost me to the dark side. But Giancarlo and I actually talk about things that aren't on the court and aren't sports related. And lo and behold, I may have actually found a new friend down in South Florida. However, you're my worst enemy during the playoffs, as I was saying in the intro, because and this week, although it's one game, and honestly, I'm just so happy that the Knicks have a couple days off. Like, it's so weird that there was 2 straight days and the Knicks didn't have a basketball game. And so the Knicks take on the Heat on Friday. I should say that we're recording this on Wednesday around 1:00. And the Heat have a game tonight. So we'll see if the Heat are coming in off of a loss or whether they're coming in off a win. Just putting that up front. The context is we are not going to be discussing anything that happens in the Heat game on Wednesday night against the Cavs. Having said that, I do want to ask one question about the playoffs last year, because we didn't get to do an exit survey or recap of the series. Knicks fans feel a certain way about the shoulda, woulda of it all. And the performance that Jalen Brunson gave and almost carried them to potentially getting to a game 7. How did a Heat fan feel about, or how do Heat fans feel about that series? Was it like what you expected, the Heat in 6, or did New York give you more of a scare than you, were you surprised at the end of the series that the Heat ended up winning the series?
I'm gonna give one to Knicks fans. Jalen Brunson earned the respect of Miami fans. And, all the Heat fans I saw and that I talked to were like, hey, man, that guy can hoop. And respect. Erik Spoelstra gave him tons of praise. All the guys in the locker room gave Brunson a ton of praise. For the other guys, not so much. But for Jalen Brunson, I know that he had earned the respect of Miami fans. And I think that, and even mine, I was like, I can't, listen, we know me. I'm a hater.
We know
I
you.
live to hate, right? And I couldn't even hate. I was like, no, he balled. So I want to give Jalen Brunson his flowers, because he played fantastic when really the Knicks offense fell apart around him, and he was the only guy really generating anything of service to them, whether it be getting, the way that he got to the line. Miami had good perimeter defenders, and he's not a beat you with speed kind of guy, which is typically what bothers Miami. He was just like, bro, he had those dudes on a string, and he was manipulating every defender any way he wanted. That's the best I've ever seen him play, I think. And just credit to him, man. He did incredible. Yeah,
he sat for 3 minutes between game 5 and game 6, and the Knicks got outscored 9-0 in those minutes. And it was so evident by the end of game 6 that the only chance we had was for Jalen Brunson and one other person to show up. In the post game of game 6 for our channel, I said we need to really understand what Jalen Brunson almost pulled off. He needed one other person to show up tonight.
Oh, it was crazy.
Randle didn't show up. RJ didn't show up. Josh Hart in a limited role kind of did, but again, limited role. They were without Quickly. No one else was hitting shot. But it was just Jalen Brunson and Scott Foster. It's the only person that showed up for him that night. That was it.
New York going.
But that's it. He needed one other player to show up.
Gabe Vincent showed up for you guys too. Gabe Vincent punched Jalen Brunson in the face at the end of that game.
He did.
I remember we were like, what are you doing?
And it was 2 shots. That's all they had for generating offense. He had 40 points in a game. The Knicks scored 92. So one other player shows up. We're back at the Garden for game 7, and he's a hero because he forced largely by himself a game 7 after being down 3-1.
Gabe Vincent, man, that was something else. But in reality, to kind of fully answer your question, I think the series went about, obviously Butler gets hurt, and that changes your expectation on the series. I will say that Josh Hart is public enemy number 1 in Miami. That
I know. I don't fully understand why, but
I'm going to say this. I don't think he tried to hurt Butler.
Of course he
didn't. I
didn't.
don't think he tried to hurt Jimmy. I do think that he tried to get a call, and it was a little bit on the reckless side, and it was just an accident. And, but fans are going to get mad at that. Right?
Fans are going to get mad at that.
Most reasonable fans are going to be like, most reasonable people are going to be like, obviously he's not trying to take him out, but he flopped. And as a result of his goofiness, he got our best player hurt. And I kind of think that that's where most rational Heat fans stand. And yeah, man, that at the end of the day, that ended our season because he was not right after that. He had, I think, one good game after that injury, which was the game against Boston where he went at Grant Williams. And if you look at the numbers, he just did not have another good game the rest of the playoffs. His ankle was huge. I mean, we were on ankle watch over at Miami Heat Beat. And listen, that's the name of the game in the playoffs. You know what I mean? And, they almost blew a lead to Boston. And against Denver, he just really had nothing. The jumper they just didn't have much going. So, but I don't want to dwell on that. But, it was a fun series. I went to game one in New York.
I remember. Yeah. You were in
Kyle Lowry
the Big
hero
Apple
game.
for it. Yeah.
I did. That was my first time in the Garden. But yeah, man. So it was fun, and I hope they can do it again.
I had a feeling the Miami Heat fan reaction to Josh Hart or feelings about Josh Hart would come up. And while I get it, like your player got hurt and you're upset with the person got him hurt. On behalf of Knicks fans that are going to be listening to this, wanting me to at least bring it up.
You're going to say Bam moves every time he sets a screen?
Quite literally lost two players in the series because of Bam Adebayo illegal screens. So as a result, like Emmanuel quickly wasn't playing great, but was the Knicks' third best player all series.
But that's what I mean,
all season.
Andrew. It's like, I don't think that and listen, everybody sets illegal screens. I'm not excusing it.
Not like Bam. He's Kevin Garnett. He's perfected it. Like he gets away with
Draymond.
it.
No, Draymond's the goat at it. I think Draymond
because of his size, he has to though, which is why I think he doesn't get called for it. The point is
only
like
6'9",
but he's still like a big body. Draymond's 6'5" guarding centers. Like, so he's able
I love Draymond.
I admire Draymond Green in his game too. The point being is that like if one franchise is not allowed to complain about like a player's actions injuring another team, it's probably a team that employs.
I think it's more
Bam
the
Adebayo.
goofy. And I think we're in agreement. I think it's more the goofy element of like, man, you tried to flop to get a call and like you literally like took our guy out. Like, so
I gotta be honest, in Knicks land, we don't even like dwell on the play. Like we don't even know if it was like Josh Hart was outstanding on defense that entire playoffs, like in those series against Mitchell. And then there's some schematic stuff with Tibbs that's like, okay, Jimmy's hobbled.
Well, they were weird.
We don't have to double him.
Yeah.
Well, it's not even the going at Jimmy. Like down the stretch in game one, I agree with you, but this is the unfortunate thing, and we could bring him up now about Julius Randle being the version he was for the rest of the playoffs after his second ankle injury. Like they just like didn't have a guy that they trusted to full-time go at Jimmy. It might have actually been Brunson, and we saw how successful he was. RJ also, outside of a 1 for 10 in game 6, was pretty successful throughout the series.
Didn't a Knick player take Jimmy in an ISO and embarrass him?
So no, what happened was down the stretch of game 5, Quentin Grimes gets
that was Quentin Grimes.
I
was like,
checked by Bam on an illegal screen that wasn't called, and then he's hobbled, and Jimmy goes ISO on Grimes.
That's what it was, and then he got the steal.
Gets pickpocketed, and so it's oh my gosh, like this is a heroic moment for Quentin Grimes, who then did nothing in game 7 or game 6.
You guys are so annoying about that.
Yeah, I mean. It happened, man. It happened.
I love the rivalry. I think it's so fun. That made me feel alive because we got Bucks, Knicks, Celtics. We were just missing the Sixers from Mount Rushmore of FU.
Yeah, or you could have even, if the Lakers had gotten in, there would have been a rematch for the finals. With LeBron. So much,
bro.
Yeah.
Well, they got Denver, which they have a history with Jokic.
That's right. Yeah, the fight.
Assault on Markieff Morris.
Is there a frustration in Miami that his first title came at the expense of the Heat?
Not really.
Not really?
Like,
Okay.
that guy's the best player in the league. Like, it's not.
Again, the rational Heat fan probably thinks.
No, I think most people. Most people are like,
okay, good.
That guy. I mean, I don't know, man. People have eyes. You can't watch that dude and be like, listen, they did they did everything. They threw the kitchen sink at him, and he figured it out. And it was just, I think most Heat fans are just upset that Jimmy wasn't 100% because, and Tyler, because I actually think, that's particularly a series where Herro would have been really effective because he's so good against drop defenses, and Denver plays a lot of drop. And I think, not to talk too much about another kind of series.
No, you're good.
Miami did this really interesting thing where they were kind of moving Jokic around by using Bam as a handoff man in corners for Robinson, which they could have done that with Tyler in pick and roll. So Jokic would have to come help, and then he'd have to come back out to defend the handoff, because not a pick and roll, but a handoff. So it's like Jokic is moving like kind of north-south a lot, and they were really getting him tired. And his numbers obviously are great, but they weren't as good as his other series. And I think they wore him down with the zone, with making him work on defense in kind of unconventional ways, not going at him in a drop, but making him move and kind of do stuff like that. So, not having Jimmy 100%, not having Herro in that series, which really could have helped them. And obviously, like they were missing size on the wing because Aaron Gordon was such a difference maker for them. And, that was kind of Miami's Achilles heel, which I thought New York did a good job of exposing, right? They were really crashing the boards, being very physical with Miami. And, they were playing Caleb Martin and Jimmy in your front court. That's just really small. And you're going to have to contend with these bigger bodies. So they had their warts. So it was a very interesting playoff run. And I actually do think the Knicks prepared them a bit because of how physical and the size that they had. And along with the Bucks as well, to kind of deal with some of the stuff later in the playoffs.
So first of all, it's funny. And like I remember the finals as much as I could as well. Obviously, I didn't watch it with the same intent eye as you or Heat fans. But to say like slowed down Jokic in and
I put that in games, massive air quotes.
Right, massive air quotes in a series. He averaged 30, amazing. 14, and 7 and shot 58% from the field. Like that's slowing him. It's the LeBron, like Iguodala wins Finals MVP for holding LeBron to 35.
You can't stop
13 and 9 in a game.
Those kinds of players. You know what I mean?
You do the best you can with them. Enough. Yeah. Honestly, holding him to 7 assists a game might actually be
that's the biggest win, bro.
Like you take away his ability to create. So I do have like questions about this season, I promise. But there was a very busy Heat offseason that like I was texting you a bunch. Was it busy? Well, as far as
I think
maybe it wasn't busy, but it was they were talked about a ton. Even though they didn't do as much as you would have thought, or at least it was reported that people thought they were going to do. The Dame stuff, like where are you with it today? I understand in the moment it was probably different than you feel now, where the Bucks have kind of righted the ship for everybody bringing up their defense. They're now the 2 seed again in the East and have like a good record. The Heat, though, have gotten off to a 10 as we're recording, a 9-5 start and have won 7 of their last 8, I believe. And if you want to take me back to this summer, though, how are you feeling in the moment when so let's start with the actual Dame trade. When the trade actually happened, what's going through your head?
Man, Joe Cronin's never seeing heaven. I experienced. Listen,
okay.
I want to be. There were 2 sides of me during this offseason, and I think for most Heat fans, I think it's Joe Cronin is going to hell,
and
on the other side, it's God. I really hope Dame makes a mess of this, because in reality, Miami had to kind of suffocate the market because Portland didn't want Herro, and I think Tyler Herro is a good player, right? I think that the fit in Miami is not the most ideal. And I think when you have guys like Jimmy and Bam, they don't fit great. And their team doesn't work. Their team is not doesn't make the most sense. It makes a lot of sense this season, and we could talk about that. But I think Tyler as the third guy with that kind of conglomeration of players that they have doesn't make a ton of sense. So that's why Heat fans always kind of want to trade him, because he's a good player that can get you the most back that doesn't fit in their plans. And I understand Portland being like, well, we're going to draft Scoot Henderson. We have Sharp. We have like this, we have the other Anthony Simons.
Anthony Simons, yeah.
They have a litany of guards. We don't need another guard who can't defend. And I think that that's a totally fair feeling to have. And they say, I don't want that guy. I don't think that's unreasonable. And I think Miami knew it, and they had to choke out the market. And I thought Dame and his agent did a very good job about that. And eventually, Dame and his agent caved, which is fine. I mean, at the end of the day, he had to do it. I thought Miami played that as well as you could. And listen, Portland got a nice return. The one thing I was kind of annoyed about was them like poo-pooing Miami's pick package. Like, oh, Miami's picks are always bad. And then they're celebrating Boston picks. I was like,
yeah, and Milwaukee picks. Yeah.
Yeah, dude. I'm like, if anything, the Heat picks are always better because they do bad in the regular season and then they just do a stupid playoff run. So that was the one thing I was like, let's chill. But listen, I can't. They clearly made out okay. Although I don't know about the Scoot Henderson character right now. I don't know if you've seen Andrew, but Scoot Henderson
going to the G League,
got sent to the G League, and this DeAndre Ayton character, he's not very good. So that's all I'm going to say. Tyler Herro's playing really well. But so obviously Miami had no plan B. It was Tyler. It was Dame or bust. And in their defense, and I will defend them, when a player does what Dame does, demands to go somewhere and chokes the market out. And I don't care what anybody says. 3 first-round picks, Tyler Herro, Jovic, and Jaquez is not an offensive package. I don't care what anybody says. And Kyle Lowry's $30 million expiring salary. I just don't care because you can flip Herro. That's not an offensive package because Jovic is a nice project player that fits a position and need for you. And Jaquez is clearly good, right? And obviously they didn't know that at the time, but it just bothered me that was some sort of offensive package. It was certainly below market value, but it's not like this. It's not like the Beal trade where you have to take cents on the dollar, like actual cents on the dollar for a guy with a no trade clause. So that's kind of my take on it. I was mad at the time because I think Joe Cronin is an asshole, but I think it worked out for everybody except for Portland.
I think the only follow-up I have to offseason talk from the Dame conversation is what you did hear out of Miami. And I think Riley spoke to this on Media Day. I don't know how much you can take from any Media Day quote, but
or Riley in general.
Yeah, true. But the sentiment of they got better or like they have enough. And I don't know if the start they've had to the season has started to lead to, a victory lap of any kind of them being like, see, we were fine not to make the Dame trade. But where do you stand on that? Do you think they got better with the offseason they had, regardless of whether they could have gotten Dame or not?
Shout out to the GOAT, Barry Jackson of the Miami Herald, who tweeted at some point, they like their team except reality. And that's become a meme. That's become a meme on Heat Twitter.
Okay.
And they say that all the time, Andrew. They're always, they just listen, the Heat say BS all the time. Right. They don't, I would not listen to a word Riley says in public.
As do the Knicks. Yeah. Tibbs is a master and listen, of it. Yeah.
Bro,
kind of what these things are. Yeah. Yeah.
Andrew, Pat Riley once said at a charity event, I will never trade Shaquille O'Neal, and then traded Shaquille O'Neal later that evening. So, I don't listen to what these guys say, but
yeah,
I think some things made sense about their team kind of going into this year. And we talked about it kind of prior to the preseason. Jaquez theoretically filled their biggest need, which was a stabilizer at power forward, because they have literally not had one, because it was Crowder, and then Crowder left, and then they put Ariza, who stunk, and then they replaced Ariza with Tucker, who was great, and they were great. They made the finals with Crowder. They were bad with Ariza. They lost in the first round. They made Game 7 of the conference finals with Tucker. And last year they put Caleb Martin and Jimmy Butler at that position, and then Kevin Love, and they had a horrible regular season, right? So they needed a stabilizer they literally did not have a real power forward last year. So Jaquez theoretically is like, okay, he is that connector that can move the ball, can theoretically shoot a little bit, can defend, is experienced as a college player, that if he pans out, that's literally the missing piece that you've needed. And Heat fans are intrigued by Highsmith. And I know that you can check the VODs on our podcast and other Heat pods, like my colleagues at 5 Reasons or our friends at Locked On Heat. We were all saying Highsmith is like the key to this working, because he provides to you theoretically kind of corner shooting in spurts. He's a defender who can play up or down. He can switch. He can do all the things. So if you're a Heat fan, you were thinking, if our power forward situation is like under control, if Kyle Lowry can play like some version of who he is because he was so bad last season, then they're cooking with something. And that has all come to fruition, right? So Gabe Vincent was really bad last regular season. And Max Strus struggled last regular season, partly because Max played out of position and partly because Gabe was hurt. But the loss of those guys were not going to be like huge regular season like losses for them. And instead, they've replaced them with a guy like Josh Richardson, who's contributing a lot for them. A guy like Jaquez, who's playing he's like a contender for like all rookie first team right now, which is like incredible value where they got him in the draft and how experienced and how like well he fits their team. Highsmith is starting for them, and I think that they've gone like 18-2 with Highsmith as a starter, from this season and last. So like that's super promising as well. So their team just kind of makes more sense. They still need another guard. I think they need some guard help. And, Duncan Robinson is playing incredible. And I think a lot of Heat fans kind of banked on he was going to progress to the mean because he's like his shooting was like 42%, 40%, 38%. And then last year was like 32%. And we're like, that 32% is not real. And lo and behold, he's playing great again this season. So I think Heat fans are all kind of looking at that, and the organization looked at that. And that's kind of where some of that belief came from because of how bad last regular season was.
So it was less about like, I'm going to throw you a bone here. It's less about Heat culture. And it was more about like last year, so much went wrong that we're due for a regression in the opposite direction, right?
Absolutely. And I think that they banked on like Heat culture for like stuff like, which is a funny sentence to say, but guys like Highsmith. Yeah. Right? It's like, hey, is this the next guy that we're going to be able to turn into a starting level rotation player? So
let me jump in because you brought up Highsmith and his lineup data is fascinating. And I don't even know if it's what he is doing specifically, but if you go to Clean the Glass and you just sort by 150 possessions this season, he'd have the second best lineup. It's the one in I believe it's still Boston. Yeah, the one in Boston that is off the charts and is plus 30. And then it's a plus 20, a plus 19.1 specifically of Lowry, Duncan Robinson, Haywood Highsmith, Jimmy Butler, and Bam Adebayo. It's on par with the Denver starting five that has been awesome since Jamal Murray went down. And then you go to the Miami Heat and their lineup data as on the whole, and 3 of their 4 most used lineups are plus 16, plus 26, and plus 19. And 2 of them feature Haywood Highsmith. So I didn't know because I'm looking at the splits and it's like 25 minutes a game, shooting 30 from 3. Like, what actually is he contributing to make this work, as you put it?
He makes their team make sense because he can defend at the 4, which they bleed threes because they overhelp constantly. They could not contain dribble penetration, as Knicks fans very well saw in that series. Jalen Brunson got to the rim whenever he wanted, and even to be honest, even to an extent, Barrett, had a field
day. RJ,
too, but they're stronger at the wings though. But particularly, like they just have the Heat. They struggle to contain dribble penetration, so they overhelp, which is why they don't allow a lot of field goal attempts at the rim, but they allow a high percentage, right? So they're constantly overhelping, which makes them bleed threes, which they're okay with. Highsmith stabilizes that because he can switch onto those ball handlers. They're playing more drop, which I think helps kind of contain the ball because I think they trust their defenders a little more this season. Kyle's been really good. And a guy like Highsmith can defend 1 through 4. And he provides enough shooting that he makes enough of them, especially from the corners, as a catch and shoot guy, that it makes their offense move. Duncan in there over Tyler, I think, is a huge part of this as well. And I think it's just, Andrew, sometimes stabilization is more important than talent. And I think that in this is a scenario where they've had more talented players in those positions, but those guys make sense. They're smart cutters. If you watch them, the ball is moving. When the ball finds Highsmith, it's either he takes an open 3 or he's cutting or he's moving. He defends hard and rebounds. What else could you ask for out of your fifth starter, right? And a guy like Duncan Robinson, who's introduced in that lineup, is playing lights out, is moving the ball. The ball never sticks. He's off the dribble, give it up when the defender comes out. It's the shots going up for an open three. He's getting guys involved, and everything's kind of humming together. So I think Highsmith and Robinson are so key to making that happen, because Jimmy's still in I don't give an F mode right now, which he's earned it. Like, I will never criticize that guy for mailing it in November, because we know that, when spring comes, he's there. But those guys are keeping them afloat right now, and that lineup data, I think, adequately reflects how they look and how good and like perfectly fitting Highsmith and Robinson are. I know you asked about Highsmith, but I think it's as much about Duncan as it is about Haywood.
To the point, I guess what's not necessarily confusing, that best lineup, the 151 possessions,
is their starting lineup.
It's their starting five. Like, Duncan's in it too, and like the points per possession.
Herro went down recently. Herro got hurt.
That leads Duncan's into the next question with Herro, because you tell me how much of a real narrative it is in Miami, whether it is a thing that they made it to the finals after Herro went down, or they go on this winning streak after Herro goes down. And like we should mention, he's questionable. He's finally out of a walking boot. He got an ankle injury. I have no idea if he's going to play in this game against the Knicks on Friday. I wouldn't be surprised.
I wouldn't count on it.
Wouldn't count on it. So, like, one thing that a lot of Knicks fans depend on is RJ Barrett has had his best games in his career against the Heat. And a lot of that has to do with the fact is that he sees blood when he sees Tyler Herro on the floor. And I mean, you tell me how much I should take in the fact that from an outsider's perspective, it does seem like they just click better. And as you said, make more sense when he's not. I mean, you did say, like, it doesn't make sense when you were talking about trade negotiations, why Tyler Herro gets put in, but you've also said he's a good basketball player. Like, make sense of it all to me, what the Tyler Herro narrative is.
So Tyler is a guy, their most successful season was the year they were the 1 seed, when Tyler was the sixth man of the year. Ran the bench units. They separated Duncan / Strus from Herro, because Herro and Duncan just historically cannot play together. Those lineups are atrocious on offense and defense. You would think that at least on offense they're good. They're just bad on offense. And I think that the way that Miami runs their off-ball movement, it is very, like, they don't run two guys, right? So if Duncan's, they'll run an empty corner hammer screen or whatever, and that's for Duncan to relocate, not for Tyler, right? Because of Jimmy's ball handling or whatever, Bam is at the elbow. Those two guys cannot, like, occupy the same space, right? And Tyler also wants the ball in his hand. And Tyler's a really good off-ball shooter, but he's a better pull-up shooter. And he wants the ball in his hand, and that's where he's most kind of comfortable, and that's where he's the best. He doesn't get free throws, which I think is the biggest problem with this offense, is that, they don't get to the rim. Nobody puts rim pressure except for Jimmy and kind of Bam. Well, Bam this season has been, like, pretty fantastic. So Tyler doesn't fit those needs, because they already have a guy that does what he's best at, and he doesn't need the ball to do that other stuff. And he's bigger. And Tyler off the bench makes the most sense, but he's, I think, rightfully wanted to start. I think he earned it. Whether I think his role is better served off the bench or not is irrelevant, because he's a young player who I think earned a starting spot, Andrew. And I think that if he wants it, he should have had it, right? Whether that's best for the team or not is a different conversation, but I think he earned it. And I'm not gonna besmirch him for wanting that. But I do think ultimately he's better served coming off their bench. And when they, the narrative that you talked about, it's a thing. People, it's hard not to notice, right? And I think people are mixed here. I think, like I said, Tyler against Denver would have been really helpful. Against Boston, not so much. That's a rough series for him. I think New York would have been another rough series because of how huntable he is with guys like Brunson and a guy like Barrett, who are really good at kind of finding those matchups. He was playing very well against Milwaukee in that first game before he got hurt, so that's kind of unfortunate. We couldn't see how that worked out. He did play well against them in the bubble. So it's hard to tell. And with this winning streak, let's keep it a buck. They've only played bad teams.
Yeah.
They have not been a single good team yet. So while I like the way that the team works with Duncan in the starting lineup more than Tyler, and I will advocate that because I just think it makes more sense, they haven't beaten anybody. They beat the Lakers, who are bad. They beat, the Bulls. They beat Charlotte twice. They beat the Spurs on a comeback when they were down like 19.
Memphis.
They beat Memphis. They beat the Nets.
Atlanta.
A lot of these games on the road. So I'll give them that credit that they've won a lot of road games. And they won some back-to-backs. But a lot of bad teams, man. A lot of they beat Atlanta, which I guess I don't know what you call Atlanta. I guess they're the best team of the bunch.
They are. Their offense is great. You could score on them, as we saw with the
and that was without Jimmy
game last night.
That was an impressive. That was a good win for them because that was without Jimmy. So I don't want to say like, oh well, they're I don't want to say they're better without Tyler, but I think they're better when Tyler has a role because their second unit needs a little work, I think. And I think that he makes a lot of sense there. So that's going to be kind of an interesting conversation when he comes back for Spo.
Is there any conversation around the team from what you gather that he could find a bench role or run the second unit again?
I think when he comes back, he'll be a starter.
He'll be a starter. Do you think they'll stagger, though? Like RJ runs the second unit right now, but he's a starter. Is there any world where you stagger Tyler's minutes enough that you can play your best lineup that we've talked about with Highsmith and Duncan in the starting five? Or with the starting five, and you put Tyler mostly with these bench units. If you stagger it correctly,
they're gonna have to change up their rotation because they were doing some weird stuff.
Like what?
I think Spo would do this thing where like no Jimmy, no Bam, no Tyler to start the fourth. It was like, what are you doing? It was very strange. And then he stopped that. Then he just like brought. I think Bam played like most, if not all, of the fourth quarter. Kind of changed that after a couple of those really bad blown leads because Miami is like one of the worst fourth quarter teams in the NBA, which is just a whole other conversation.
Can I ask you a question while we're on that? Yeah. The no Jimmy, no Bam, no Tyler minutes. So like during the playoffs, Knicks fans got frustrated at as weird as this sounds, at the no Randle, no Brunson minutes. Like it would be the beginning of the second, beginning of the fourth, like you run the bench unit out there and it's RJ with the bench. And it was such a sticking point with Knicks fans. Like, why is he doing this? You have to have one on the floor at all times. The gravity is different when they do. I think there's some truth to that. I also looked across the aisle, and the way the Knicks got back in Game 5 against the Heat after a dreadful first quarter, where I thought we were headed for Heat in 5, is this 18-2 run when Bam and Jimmy are both on the bench. So like you recognize that Spo does it. You get to the finals and Malone is running these lineups without Murray or Jokic. And like the fact that like Doc was getting criticized for it in Miami, in Philly, no Embiid, no Harden. So like, do you think it matters like the minutes without Jimmy and Bam? So like, why does every coach do it though?
Because they have a limited team. Mm-hmm. Right? They have all these role players. They're like super role players that like are very specialized. Right? So it's like you throw out Richardson and a rookie and whatever is left of Caleb Martin's knees and Kevin Love or Thomas Bryant, who's been awful. So you have this like hodgepodge of dudes. And I was like, you look at with Duncan Robinson and you're just like, how are they supposed to score? I don't understand. Like, what's the thought process here? And all those guys can't defend either. So it's like, it doesn't make sense. At least with Denver, you can be like, all right, well, you're running Gordon. You can run a facsimile of what you run with Jokic because Gordon's a good passer. You can run some of the handoff stuff. You play him at the small ball 5, and you just try to freaking run, right? And you got these KCP and all these guys that like move really well and there's strong cutting. And Jokic and Murray are not like saving you defensively. And Denver was scoring fine with those guys on the bench, and they were defending better because they were able to switch a lot more. So for Denver, it makes sense. And that way you optimize the Jokic minutes by keeping him stapled to his favorite pick and roll partner. It makes less sense if you're Miami or New York when you're just like, well, I think New York is even different because I think New York even has more guys that can kind of hurt you off the dribble like quickly. And you saw Grimes kind of showed some ball skills, and RJ. Miami has 3 guys that can create their own shot.
So again, my question is less about whether, I guess I shouldn't have even asked if it makes sense. If it's more like, or does it matter? I more mean like, why do coaches do this? You bring up the finals with Jokic.
I think
and
it's
Murray.
Optimization. I think it's like you just want
like Denver was doing this in the conference finals too. And the way the Lakers were getting back in games and building leads is because they staggered LeBron and AD. Like one was on the court at all times. Now this variable of Austin Reeves, I don't know what you want to make of it, but like it was clearly working. But like,
unfortunately,
that was one of the things we were pointing to as Knicks fans that were like, I don't think this is costing them that much. I do believe it's a margin that they could get away from, but by game 5, they did get away from it. Brunson played the entire game in game 5, and he sat for 3 minutes, and apparently it was the only thing that hurt them in game 6. Really, is that like from a coaching decision, it was like you lost the Brunson minutes by the lineup that you put out there. But like it seems like a lot of coaches do that. Why do you think that is when it's clearly not something that works?
I think that I think coaches want their stars rested for the end of game. So I think like a lot of times at the start of quarters, like they want to end the half, like, with their best guys. And I think particularly in the fourth quarter, this is why like oftentimes you see these really weird lineups to end the third, start the fourth. And sometimes they're like, hey, can I buy 2 minutes? Right.
Yeah.
And in the playoffs, it's different than in the playoffs, the regular season, coaches are coaches and they're like, and players are players. Like players have said a lot. I like to know what, like Jimmy's like, I come in at 6:30 in the fourth. That's when I come in and I need to know so I can be mentally prepared to do that. And players like to know they like their rotation stable. The playoffs are different because in the playoffs, as we saw with Tibbs, it's like, okay, I need to buy 3 minutes because my guy can't, this is too much for Jalen. The playoffs is kind of different. You kind of take it, okay, can I buy a little time as opposed to where you're coaching in the playoffs, you coach the situation. In the regular season, you're implementing a system that will kind of carry you through 82. So they, Spo does tinker because he did go away from that. It clearly was not working. And they switched up their rotation and they sat Bam a little early in the fourth. They played Jimmy and Love together as Love is a new backup 5. So I think coaches do it just because they want some sort of consistency and they want to kind of play their guys together at the end and get those end of game reps when those guys are rested, as opposed to stretching out minutes in the fourth quarter, because fourth quarter minutes are a lot more intense, Andrew, right?
Especially in the playoffs. Yeah.
And I think you need to, I don't think you also want to bring a guy in to start the fourth, take him out, and then bring him back in at the end of the fourth. I think that might throw a guy's rhythm off too. That I don't know. I should ask coaches this, but certainly I have to think that that's a factor.
I don't know if you noticed this. They're doing that in Atlanta right now.
Yeah,
like the Snyder rotation is Trey for the first 3 minutes, then Trey sits and it's DeJounte's show for the next 4. Or I think it's 4, 4, and 4. And that's how the Knicks, they just won a game on the road in Atlanta. And they played the Trey minutes about even, and it was a close game with about 8 minutes left. Trey subs out. Atlanta goes up 7, and then Tibbs calls timeout, and then he puts Trey back in, and the Knicks didn't have a possession the rest of the game that didn't result in points. So I don't know. I think it could go either way, like your system working, and then in the playoffs, like I want to get your perspective on Tibbs as a coach. I know Miami's largely owned him over the years, but like there is such a frustration and a loud minority of Knicks fans that are like, we'd be better with someone else. We'd have a higher ceiling with someone else. And
who's that someone else though?
You could say Johnny Bryant, their assistant coach. You could say like there was an outcry for Bud when he got fired by what's up?
I like Bud.
You like Bud? So should the Knicks have gone and gotten him over Tibbs after they got to the second round for the first time since 2013?
I think Bud's better than Tibbs.
You think? I don't. I think Bud's largely succeeded because of the great players that he's had.
I mean, bro, that guy took that Atlanta team and made them like really good.
Very weak Eastern Conference.
But they still won like 60-something games, bro. That's not easy.
That's a great regular season, yes. If you're saying you want to raise the ceiling, then go get a guy that raises your ceiling.
I want to, let's have a frank conversation.
Yeah.
Because the Knicks are not at a position where they're going to contend soon.
Okay. I agree with that. That's the narrative. Away. That's the narrative that comes out is they don't need a player
Andrew,
or two.
Even if they get Donovan Mitchell, I think they're still a move or two away.
Well, that's a different conversation.
I guess
like who the player is.
Mitchell. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, if you get Mitchell plus, I don't know, another guy, or if the Knicks get Zion, we're having a different conversation. You know what I mean? Or like, so it just I'm just like saying it's like they're not for this year. I think last year was a success for New York. I think that's a great season. And I think the Knicks fans should be very happy. I think the Knicks organization should be very happy that they, got to game 6 of the second round for the first time in I don't know how long.
2013. Yep.
your newly acquired free agent was like kind of had a breakout performance as like a lead guard, and I have my thoughts on Randle, and I think kind of flipping Randle for somebody that's a little bit more consistent, and that's a little, I kind of think some of Randle's production is spotty. He has some really great moments, right? He's had some seasons in the regular season where you're just like, wow, this guy is like the kind of power forward that you want in the modern NBA. And then he just kind of disappears. And doesn't he have like, didn't he flip off Knicks fans or whatever? I don't know. The vibes are off with him. For me, like watching. Like, I'm not a big Randle fan, but I feel the vibes are off.
So this is the point where I usually
But now with
ask,
Jalen. Jalen's the opposite,
Jalen
bro.
Brunson.
Jalen is vibe city, dude.
Yeah, reigning Eastern Conference Player of the Week. We can have the Randle conversation. Yes, he won last week for the Eastern Conference. We could have the Randle convo now. That's about now in the pod is when I discuss, like I ask for my guest to ask me a Knicks question or give a Knicks thought. So were you aware of the start Randle got off to? I think the last time we spoke.
It was really bad.
Yeah.
I was making fun of it.
Yeah. And it was like, Randle's off to like the worst start in 20 years, like of anybody of that volume.
Hell yeah, brother.
And like, man, the post game after the Randle game against Milwaukee, where he shot 5 of 20 with a ton of turnovers, like he was shooting 12% from three on a ton of volume, shooting 26% from right. Like I was trying to remember the makes that's how bad the start was. And coming off of last year's playoffs, which was also coming off of the year before, in which the thumbs down year is what we call it, where he literally was having a good game and he was gave a thumbs down to the fan base.
That's kind of badass.
I mean, he had to put a thing out on Instagram to be like, my bad.
The vibes are off, but it is funny.
Right. What's funny, even funnier, I should say, the game after we not first met, our second conversation where he hit the quote unquote buzzer beater. And mine wasn't at the buzzer, but the game winning shot,
ridiculous shot
in Miami, it reset everything for a week. Like it changed the narrative with Randle during it. Like it was the Knicks' 8th win in a row. He was clearly headed for all NBA. That was his 41st and 42nd point. Like, obviously, in New York, you do something in Miami, and we're gonna remember it. And we were set up like with
Make
Randle.
Sure to keep that energy on Sunday. I need this.
Friday.
That's right. It's Friday.
Yeah, we
By
play
the way,
Friday.
For context for your audience, I'm a Jags fan and I'm sick of Dolphins fans. So Jets, please.
Ironically, the Jets and Dolphins also play Friday night, so it's a Black Friday game.
No, that's what I meant.
Oh, okay, that's what you're saying. Keep that energy.
I want the Jets energy. I want the New York to do something in Miami energy.
Listen, we don't have to. I have another pod, Jets Therapy, where I get all my thoughts out there.
Listen to that. New York, check that out.
Thank you. I'll just give you the 20-second version. Ain't happening. There, I gave you the 5-second version. Ain't happening. Like the Jets
have some guts.
I don't. I have guts. The Jets offense doesn't have a pulse. So you kind of need one in order to succeed at the other. The temperature that I get as far as the vibes are concerned with Randle, there's like a very small subset that's like, man, we haven't had a lot of players be as successful as he is. Like, appreciate this. Yes, fine, upgrade if the opportunity's there. But man, like we're doing these trivia things with Knicks Film School, like these things called pop quizzes. And I'm going through StatHead and creating these trivia questions for Macri and some of our hosts. And Julius Randle's popping up in every Carmelo Anthony conversation. He's always second, but it's like most points in the last 20 years. It's Carmelo Anthony, Julius Randle. Most rebounds in the last 15 years. Carmelo Anthony, Julius Randle. Like, we have not had a lot of players make All-NBA twice in a span of 3 years. We have not had a lot of players make the All-Star game twice in a span of 3 years. I get it. You're grading it against the Knicks, but there is a small subset I think I subscribe to that's like, if the whole point is regular season success right now and then you upgrade, he's actually been a large success. I do think the trust issues that are there, though, that eventually we're going to want to win something more than regular season games. And in 2 playoff experiments, he's been the worst high volume playoff player in NBA history. So
Andrew,
that's where they are right now.
A guy can take you from a lottery team to like a respectable team. And sometimes those guys can't take you over the top. And I think of a guy like Eric Bledsoe as a good example, right? A guy that helped Milwaukee get from like, okay, like this isn't a very serious team. Obviously, Giannis is the engine, but like I'm talking like, one of these guys that was like made all-star teams, like really good. And he clearly wasn't the championship answer. And I'm sure that Milwaukee fans, did appreciate guys like, Bledsoe. And Bledsoe was the first name that comes to mind. I'm sure that there are others. But, DeMar DeRozan.
DeRozan's the one I always go to. That Randle is our DeRozan for right now.
And well, I think the DeRozan vibes were different because Raptors fans all like universally love DeRozan.
They're heartbroken the day of that trade. And they all recognized we got better, but I hate that we're going to compete for a title without DeMar.
So sometimes guys, and could be coaches, right? Could be, a guy like, Dwayne Casey in Toronto, to use the Toronto example again, the upgrade to Nick Nurse. I'm sure that Raptor fans, Dwayne Casey really brought that franchise from, a team that wasn't doing a lot to a perennial 50-win team, and, really were the biggest competitors to Cleveland, competitors because Cleveland would wash them. But, they did put up, they tried to put up a fight at least and all that. So I think sometimes those guys are not, and I think the same for Tibbs as well, kind of loop back the whole conversation full circle. I think sometimes those guys that help get you somewhere don't always have to be the guys that take you to the finish line. And that's an uncomfortable conversation for fans to have. And I think that you have a good perspective on Randle. I think everything that you've said is 100% correct. He's been very successful. I mean, making all NBA is a huge accomplishment, but he does have his warts. And sometimes, Andrew, you need like when you have LeBron and Dwayne Wade, you and Chris Bosh, you can fix other warts, right? When you have Draymond, Steph, Clay, and those guys and KD, you fix warts. Not every team has that luxury, and you got to get every element right. And sometimes you like a guy and it's just the fit's not perfect and you don't have enough talent to overcorrect for that. And I kind of think that's what the Knicks are in. So I don't disagree with Knicks fans that might not want Thibodeau there. I think that if you want to be a successful team, in the regular season and kind of win a couple playoff series, I think Tibbs is a good coach, clearly very prepared. I think defensively, you know what he brings. I think that he gives you an element of toughness that I think is a little bit understated. The Knicks are a physical team. We know their MO. They have an identity. And I think for a lot of people in New York, that feels great that we're like, okay, this team knows who they are under Tibbs. And that's important. That's not like a small thing. And you may get another guy in here and you may have to find years to find another coach that can give you an identity. But sometimes you got to take bigger swings to elevate, but I don't think the Knicks are at a point that they need to make that decision with their coach yet. I think if they acquire some more talent, then you have to start those conversations.
So I'm glad you said it, that the talent's not there yet, because that has been a belief from a subset of Knicks fans.
Because I don't want your audience to get mad at me.
No. Well, first of all, they're going to get mad at you regardless.
They're going to hate me regardless.
You already brought up the Josh Hart thing, so 3 minutes in, they were already mad at you.
I opened bad.
Yeah, but there will be Knicks fans that are like, no, he's a bad coach. Just get him out of here. And they would have done better with.
He's not a bad coach.
I agree. And again, the conversation after the second round last year was like, we lost to this 8th seed. How dare you?
Hell yeah, brother.
This is what the Heat do. They got 2 other teams to fire their coach at the end of last season.
Did you see yesterday? I saw Celtic fans and Buck fans arguing who got beat worse.
I saw. Yeah. You put that on Twitter and it was like, oh, this is what the Heat do. Because when you go to this winning streak, you mentioned they haven't beaten anybody. I'll add in that the Bulls are the only team in this stretch of winning that you beat by double figures. I don't even know if you could claim that as a victory because there's this 22-1 start that you blew. And I can't even claim that that's the worst memory of the matchup in the back-to-back against the Bulls. So, look, the Heat, this is what I've been saying on our side of things, is the Heat are just going to do this to us again, where they're going to win every game or play every game within a 5 to 6 point margin, and they're going to be close. And you're not going to be able to get a good overall evaluation for them. They're just barely outscored the other team this season on the whole. Their net rating is barely a positive, and they might win 60. They might win 50 games. They might win 35 games. And I'm going to be terrified wherever they are come playoff time, and that's just until the dragon has been slayed. Like, I'm officially spooked after last year. I thought I had a good
Bill
read.
Simmons. You're Bill Simmons talking about.
I'm not him and Mike Schur being like the zombie heat. I do recognize they're the Patriots for me now, where it's like, until they're dead, I will then start to think it's over. I will then think it's over. Man.
It's Spo.
I do think it is. You have the best coach in the league, which is why, like, come playoff time, I was ready to have, like, you know what? It's an honor to lose to the Milwaukee Bucks. Although I give Tibbs a shot in a series against Bud, who I personally think they're on the same level of. We can argue about it in a different day. But I said, during our pregame pod, I was like, I think the only coach that scares me the rest of the way is Spo. And it's why I give, like, the Heat an edge.
I heard that the entire playoffs, Andrew. Everybody was talking about, this and this, but Spo. Right,
but Spo, he's honestly, like, their most valuable player at this point.
but Spo, which makes me happy because, man, they wanted him fired, bro. Like,
that was the if I can respond to the hangover time comments that I was watching during the finals, and it's like, got to get a different coach in here. Like, it's old and tired. Like, what Spo did, like, I couldn't believe the fire Spos that I was seeing throughout the playoffs.
Some fans are ridiculous. There are Spurs fans that want, like, Popovich, like, gone. It's crazy.
Yeah. The Sohan thing is weird, but I also, at a certain point, you gotta just let Pop, like, it's the Belichick thing. Like, at a certain point, he gets to go out on his own. You know,
I think with a guy like Spoelstra, you know, it's not just what he does from an X's and O's perspective. Players love that guy. Like, if you read the story, I believe it was in The Athletic 2 years ago, about what he did for Justice Winslow when Winslow was going through some of the lowest points in his life. You know, I've kind of heard that Spo made the call to Josh to bring him back, and Josh took a below market value to be here with Spo. And, you know, when the relationship with the organization with Dwayne and Riley and Harrison fell apart, the one that didn't was with Spo. That's brotherhood. And even a guy like LeBron spoke glowingly about, I mean, LeBron doesn't do that. LeBron doesn't lose a game and then go on the podium and talk about how great the other coach is. But he did it for Spo because there's a respect there. And during the finals as well, like, what that guy brings from not just an X's and O's, but what he's done for players, like, personally, that guy cares about people, and he tries to be, I think, as good as, you know, a person to these people as he can be, because I think he understands that this is not just what we're doing on the court is not the only thing that matters, but it's, you know, I want to be somebody that matters to them as human beings. And that translates a long way, man. I think we've all worked for people that we feel like don't care about us, but I think it's a little different when we feel guys care about us. And Andrew, everybody buys into what he does. Not to make this like a big Spo rant thing, but, like, Dwayne Wade came off the bench for this franchise because it was the best for the team, right? Goran Dragic came off the bench when, you know, these are accomplished players. I mean, Dwayne Wade is like the franchise, right? And he bought into what Spo asked. Kyle Lowry, who, listen, that's my favorite player.
It's your guy. Yeah.
Kyle Lowry is the most persnickety a-hole you can imagine. Kyle Lowry was in training camp saying, I should be the starting point guard, like, zero conversation, and book closed. And that guy came off the bench last season for Gabe Vincent because if that guy bought into Spo, no complaints, come on. Like, that shows the kind of guy he is. So just aside from the X's and O's, just believe in him. And then we could talk about all the innovations he's done, all the kind of inverted sets that he runs. The spotations is a popular thing on Heat Twitter, how everybody gets mad at his rotations, but you cannot deny kind of the innovations that he's done on both offense and defense. And Andrew, how every year they change their defense, and depending on their personnel. Last year, switch heavy. This year, they're playing more drop. They're playing less zone. Last year, it was a lot of switch, a lot of zone. This year, more drop, less zone. Like, they change because he's not beholden to, like, his rigid ideas. He wants to, like, do what's best with the personnel that he has.
Yeah, he'll never get on the open market, but, like,
I hope not.
I feel like every single fan base would say, like, give me Spo over their coach.
I think maybe the Spurs don't because of legacy, but yeah.
I even think if you ask a Spurs fan, they'd be like we get the next Pop. Like the next best thing is a younger version of Pop that may be more conducive to the modern game.
Maybe Denver says no too. I think they love Malone.
I think they love Malone. I think they all recognize why they're winning is because they have one of the greatest players in NBA history in his prime on the team right now. Like what Spo did last year, I think will be his crowning achievement, not what he did throughout the big three era.
And I think he will feel. Actually, I think if you ask Spo, I think he's most proud of 30 and 11, going 30 and 11,
going 11 and 30 to then go 30 and 11
with Dion.
I remember that year,
and they changed their whole. They changed their whole system mid-season, Andrew. And that's what I mean about like a guy like Erik is that he's not. He just doesn't do stuff. Oh, this is how we do it. No, mid-season, he's like, guys, new plan. When they made the finals, they changed their entire defense when they acquired Iguodala and Crowder, and they started switching more, and they asked Bam to do a lot more things. I mean, like that's a guy that like, hey, he's gonna challenge his players. He's gonna change up the scheme sometimes mid-season, and his guys are like, okay, we ball.
Yeah, I think there are things Tibbs has brought to this team, like you said, the identity stuff that gets taken for granted.
Small, man. That's not
like
small.
The other night they're playing Minnesota, who it's just a bitch to try and get any type of offense against them. Like especially when you're not hitting shots, like you're like there are possessions where they're getting 6 or 7 passes off, and it's like, okay, there's clearly they're utilizing ball movement, they're getting around everything, and then they're getting to the rim where it's like, oh, this is there. They did it. They found the open man, and Rudy just comes out of nowhere, and it's like, oh, so that didn't work. And they're having so many problems on offense that night, and yet they're still fighting in the fourth quarter. And it's like, yeah, that's a Tibbs team. Like there is a floor with him that I think is appreciated. And I agree with you. Next talent upgrade, we then have the other conversation of does this require a coaching upgrade, which is a natural progression of things. But, I'm curious about this matchup on Friday and how much juice will actually be there. It's a nationally televised game. It's a
playoff rematch,
technically a tournament game. And it'll lead to my last question. I've been asking this Mount Rushmore question with everybody, G, and I'm curious where you go with this. Because here in New York, we have the certain dates that we circle on the calendar. And this is absolutely the first one I circled when we got there. And I've been asking everybody, every fan base, what's the Mount Rushmore of rivals you look forward to? What are the 4 teams you circle on the calendar when the schedule gets released every year? Are the Knicks on it for you, a longtime Heat fan? While I get it that like we go back to the 90s with this, I know that there are many Heat rivalries now because you've had some playoff success without us. So who are the 4 teams?
Okay, Boston for sure. I think Boston is Miami's modern rival, and I think Celtic fans would say the same.
Can I follow up with that real quick? Because we had our buddy Jack Simone on the pod, and he said someone at Celtics Pod said the Heat and Celtics are not a rivalry. Your comment?
In what world? They
every time they've played, it's been clear who the better team is. That they're just a team that annoys me. They're not. There's not enough regular season matchups.
Is he saying that because the Heat I think the Celtics have only won 2 playoff series against the Heat since 2010. Is that what he's saying?
Listen, I think it's.
Is he saying that it's clear that Boston's not on Miami's level?
No. But he's saying is like it's not a rivalry. That like, I got to go and read the article.
Every Boston person I've talked to has.
I believe that they are. I thought that it would be very clear that the Heat are on the Celtics Mount Rushmore. I just
at least now since 2010. Since 2010 for sure.
Man, there's enough history there. I think the case that was more being made is that they're not the primary rivalry. Like it's not. It's not Celtics Lakers.
It's always going to be the Lakers.
But like the argument was that the Sixers are then next, and it's like I
understand that because of history.
And they're a division rival. But I think the regular season aspect has been brought up too much. We're talking 3 of the last 4 years the Celtics and the Heat have played in the playoffs.
I think Boston fans hate the Heat more than the Sixers because the Heat are way more rent free. It's constant, with them, and I've noticed it's constant. And listen, since 2010, they played 3 times in the Big 3 era, and that went all 3 to the Heat.
Twice.
I'm sorry,
right?
They played twice, but they played 1 year before.
So the year that forced before the Big 3. Yeah, I agree.
So and that was actually pretty cool because it was the first round, the first year, then the second round, the second year, then the third round, the third year. So Miami went 2-1, and then this recent kind of trilogy, Miami also went 2-1, right? So
and was a shot at being 3-0. Yeah,
they've played 6 times since 2010, bro.
Believe me, I agree.
Played
it's a
like
rivalry.
half the
There's
years in the playoffs
too. Yeah.
And it's like big games. You know what I mean? Like,
so the
crazy.
Celtics end up being
crazy.
1.
Celtics, personally, bro, I hate Philly more than anything.
Okay.
I can't stand the Sixers.
One of my favorite G rants on our dearly departed Hangover Time is you talking about Embiid.
Embiid's a bozo, bro. I can't. Did you see that flop yesterday to get the 2 free throws? I'm just sick of that.
Shout out to our film expert, Benji Ritholtz, said he wanted Embiid investigated for crimes against humanity for that flop.
That's not a shooting foul, dude. That's on the floor. Like, I'm so sick of it. Regardless. Yeah. So those 2 for sure. I would put the Knicks and the Lakers. This year, though, I replaced the Knicks with the Bucks because of the Dame saga. But for history, it's Celtics, Sixers, Knicks, Lakers. That the Lakers are a rival.
The Lakers?
They're not a rival, but
because was the LeBron and Riley thing?
I think the LeBron thing, I think the Kobe Dwayne thing over the years, like back in the day, bro, Kobe Wade was like the matchup we wanted to watch every single year. And it was Wade, Shaq, Kobe.
Yeah.
You know, that was the Christmas.
That was a Christmas day. Yeah.
Heat Lakers to me, man. And then you have the finals history now and then LeBron stuff. That's always been, you know, that for Heat fans, I think. And I think that really, and I wrote about this at the time when Kobe had retired. You know, a lot of Dwayne's career was contextualized through Kobe, and Kobe was always the measuring stick by which Dwayne was measured. And I think that Dwayne played some of his best basketball in those matchups, and those were unforgettable. You know, that amazing Kobe buzzer beater, where he goes, that shot was all luck, right? Because like him and Dwayne was so I'll always have a special place for that. But yeah, I think those would be the 4. I think at times that can change because Cleveland for a little bit because the Dwayne and LeBron stuff was real. But I mean, you can't beat classic Shaq Kobe beef and then the D Wade element, and then obviously so that's where I go. This year I put Milwaukee over the Knicks only because that Dame stuff was spicy. So, but you know, always the Knicks is always like I always try to go to a game a year.
Well, we'll see.
Always a Knick game.
We'll see if these games build up to something. Like if these 2 teams match up in the playoffs again.
I hope, man.
You know,
it's good for everybody. We have fun. The fan bases have fun, and I like to beef. I like a good clean beef. You know what I mean? Like as long
clean
as we're not
beef,
like
yes.
saying things that are like outside of I love the little videos outside on Fifth Avenue of the New Yorkers going crazy, talking smack about Jimmy. You know, I love that, bro. I want that. I like our hangover time, going at it with Heat fans. I like, you know, I love that. I like being at the arena and I will say this about Knick fans, and I'm glad I can say this. I went as a Heat fan for game 1, and everybody was a great sport. Obviously, we all kept it clean and stuff, but you know, I talked my smack, and they were just like, "I see you game 2. See you game 2." It was never escalated. It was like, you know. So shout out to New York for keeping it real, and I had a lot of fun when I went. So
listen,
I was scared, Andrew. I was like, are people gonna? I've never been to a road playoff game before, and that was a hostile environment because your fans really get into it. But
they do, and I think the Garden is one of the rare places that can win a game by itself. Like we saw that in the Cavs series. Like there's just not a single veteran on that team that was prepared some of the younger guys that hadn't been in that type of situation.
Why does Harry Styles have a banner though?
Because he sold out a
You can't have Harry Styles have a banner.
It's a concert venue too. Like that's the problem with the Garden is that the things that it's most famous for. Like, but he has like a check mark. I have no idea what the check mark is, but he has a check mark. Billy Joel's got something up there.
I was like, what?
But that's the thing. The Garden is famous, like the world's most famous arena, for everything but the fact the Knicks play their home games there. So, like, when you look at the banners up there, you get an idea of how much success the Knicks have had
Patrick Ewing,
in that building.
Harry Styles.
Right, but that Patrick Ewing's the last number they retired since the 70s. Gee, like they haven't had, like the thing I like to bring up that a lot of Knicks fans that are also Yankee fans get annoyed about is like the Knicks are the Mets. Like they haven't had a ton of winning in their franchise.
Is Melo getting the jersey retired?
Great question. He's been around the Garden a ton lately.
He was there he was there for that game.
He's there the entire playoffs. He's been at every home game this year.
I think of him as a Knick. I think of him as a Knick.
I think of him as a Knick too. I know in Denver he probably had more success, but number 15 ain't getting
Denver too, right?
Number 15 is not getting retired with Melo's number or Melo's name on it in Denver. So, but it's not like number 15 is Jokic.
You do both, for sure.
I'd be fine with it, but I think if you're gonna retire a number, Melo.
I mean, come on, you have
the next one.
It's like an iconic.
There is a generation of young Knicks fans that became Knicks fans during the only successful era since 2000, and it's those 2-3 years with Melo. And people,
you think the organization will do it though?
I think the fact that his old agent is running the franchise helps, but I have no idea for it.
That's
I've
a Dolan
seen one,
call, I imagine.
Fine, but like as you heard in the news lately, Dolan's relenting a lot of his calls lately. He's more focused on this globe out in Vegas at the moment. So I have no idea. I honestly have no idea. I probably lean yes that it'll eventually happen, but I have no idea. That's my answer.
Okay. I think he's like the most borderline you can get, where it's like maybe not enough success, but like clearly like a franchise icon, and he's like certainly like, you know, he probably had more quote unquote success somewhere else, but you know, I think he was more iconic in New York, so it kind of makes it, because he's certainly of a player, he is of a status that deserves to be honored. He's one of the best basketball players ever.
It's why I keep comparing it to the Mets. The Mets retired Mike Piazza's number. Mike Piazza finished over 500 with the Mets twice. They made the playoffs twice. Like Melo made the playoffs with the Knicks 3 times. They made to the conference finals, conference semis once. Like
Game 7 against Indy.
Well, Game 6, which is ironically.
Was it a 7? What was the Hibbert
went
block?
6. The Hibbert blocks was Game 6 in Indiana. So it like, man, the parallels to last year's playoffs to that series with like Melo had 39 in that Game 6 on the road, almost forced the Game 7. Jalen Brunson had 40 on the road, just needed one more player to show up. And it had to be more than just the referees.
Except Hibbert's a goober.
Yeah, I guess. There was a stretch there where he worked and then the league decided 5s needed to shoot 3s. So he got kind of played out the league and as a result.
Now he's a YouTuber.
Yes. And apparently one of the first things Knicks fans said to him was, please don't talk about the Melo block, which still haunts my dreams. All right, we're starting to bounce around, and we got Thanksgiving plans to go work on. G, thank you so much for every time you do this. I look forward to our conversations on and off air. Before you get out of here, anything you want to say to Knicks fans about where they could find the Miami Heat beat and some new things you guys are doing this season?
Listen, guys, I love when opposing fans listen to our post games. We're live after most games on twitch.tv/Miami Heat Beat. I don't believe we're live on Friday. I think we have given the holiday off to everybody, but we will do a wrap up pod on that, and that will be live on Twitch. So follow us on Twitch, follow us on Twitter @MIA Heat Beat. Come on, talk some smack. Let's bring the rivalry back, guys. Let's bring the energy. Let's have some fun. Let's hate each other. Let's do it. Follow me at GNavas103, but most importantly at MIA Heat Beat. Direct attention there, so we can stoke some flames. We'll make beautiful music together, New York.
Yes, let's do it. G, as always, man, thanks for coming on.
Love you guys.